Hello, my fine friends, and welcome back to Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, CMO with Visit Myrtle Beach, joined as ever with Adam Stoker from Relic. How are you today, Adam?
Oh, Stuart, I am so good. And I tell you what, I am so happy to be here. I can't imagine being anywhere else right now.
See, you're just upping the ante every week. Last week, you finally nailed it with Will. Now you're like showing genuine enthusiasm. If this is going to get better every week, it's going to be like, did you ever see that person that went on generative AI image generator and started saying, make a bunny rabbit that's as happy as can be or something like that? And they kept saying, no, more happy, more happy. And eventually it created like this being that transcended everything and basically
No.
created God. So it's funny. Type in Happy Bunny AI. You'll find it. It's amazing. So eventually you're going to transcend this show with your enthusiasm. So, but I'm especially enthusiastic today because of our guest. So I'm going to let her introduce herself in a second. But Melissa and I, Melissa Kavanagh, we've known each other for a long time. We used to work together. She and I used to do a podcast at my previous employer, Fuel Travel, and she is one of the most knowledgeable people in the weeds of analytics that I've ever met. She knows the ins and outs of every platform, and especially she knows the ins and outs of Google Analytics 4, which is what the topic's going to be today. We're not sure what the title's going to be. I think it might be "Why is GA4 whack?" or something like that, because I got to tell you, this might be not a controversial one, but it's going to be an opinionated one. So hold on to your hats because Melissa, she comes with opinions. Melissa, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you can be a little more enthusiastic. Like you
I'm
Here we
can.
so
go.
happy to be here.
Melissa,
That's
this is a
funny.
slippery slope. Next thing you know, you're going to have to hire a fireworks specialist for next time you come on to make your entrance good enough for Stuart.
Oh,
I've
we
been
could do
looking
like
forward to this for a
WWE.
long time.
I think that's a new thing, Adam. I think we start doing WWE style intros for all of our guests. It'd be amazing. Melissa, since we've worked together, it's been a minute. It's been a few years now. What have you been up to? Tell the audience what your current role is and what you do.
I
I
work for
wasn't say for
Westgate.
fun, but analytics is fun for you.
It is. Yes, it is. I work for Westgate Resorts and I am the senior manager of digital analytics there. So I'm in charge of doing all the analytics things. I'm in charge of Google Tag Manager and working with all of our vendors and pixel placing, and pixel placing is going on my tombstone. I am an excellent pixel placer.
Pixel place a person.
Yeah.
Say
Yes.
that three times fast. That's good. So one of the reasons we wanted Melissa on the show today is I feel like analytics is one of those areas of DMOs that we don't give enough attention to. We don't talk about enough. We talk about these sort of big, grandiose ideas and strategies and trends and things like that. But we don't really talk at that tactical level about performance as much as we should. So we went to Melissa because I felt like she was the person, and coming from outside the industry too, which I want to do more on this show, is bring outside perspectives. Maybe we can learn a thing or two along the way that will just help us all improve and be better tomorrow than we were today. And that's sort of the point of this show. So before we jump into the topic and why GA4 is whack and what we can do about it, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It is jingle to be developed at some point. What count are we at now, Adam? Do you know?
I don't know. I'm kind of bummed out about the whole jingle thing,
Lower
Stuart.
than 100.
Yeah, we're lower
If
than 100.
if we had more than one listener, then you may have gotten to 100 right now by now. But
Yeah, the
I don't
problem
know.
is every time my mom clicks that like button, it goes on and off, and she doesn't
Yeah.
understand that it doesn't stack on top of each other, you know?
Yeah, so it's actually going down. Yeah, I understand. But it is time for Stu's News. And this is going to be a super indulgent one again. We've done this a couple of times now, but this is something I've been excited about. We've been talking about traveling the spectrum for a long time. We talked about traveling the spectrum is coming to Peacock. But I can tell you that anyone that's listening to this episode, Traveling the Spectrum is now available on Peacock, released on December 12th, 2024. So you can go check out all 6 episodes right now on Peacock. And you can pause this show, go watch this 6, and then come listen to the rest of the show. Or you can finish this show and then go watch all 6 episodes. But man, this has been a long time coming. I'm super excited. This is finally out in the wild. So that's Stu's news for today. Super
I'm
excited.
super happy for you. That is great. I'm excited to watch it myself.
Congrats. I actually think this is one of those projects that, yes, it will drive destination, or it will drive visitation to the destination, but I think this could be one of the, I guess, linchpins or keystones of where things could go from an accessibility perspective, and helping all of these families. I mean, we're talking 75 million Americans who don't currently travel, to have the benefits of travel that make us all want to be in the business of travel, right? And so
Yep.
to be able to play a part in something that's actually going to change the future for a large group of people, I think that's pretty fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, it's taken a village to really pull this off, and a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and patience. But I think if you watch this show, when you watch this show, everyone that's listening, so really Adam's mom, when you're watching this show, it is about people with autism, but it's more than that. It's about people and travel and the value of travel and what travel means to people and how it improves our lives. Every one of us, whether we're neurodiverse or neurotypical, travel is a benefit to everyone, and it's an inalienable right. And so, what you'll see with these three families is a journey, both a literal journey and a metaphorical journey that they all take, and that they all three families, every member of every family leaves a different person than they came. And so that's the power of travel, and that's why we're in this business, is to help promote that gift to everyone, regardless of their ability or disability. And so we are just getting started. We're already talking about derivative shows and other shows that can focus on audiences and communities that maybe don't get a fair shake at travel. And so stay tuned for more. But right now, go watch Traveling the Spectrum on Peacock. It is available anywhere you're watching in the US, and hopefully eventually globally, but right now, North America. So yeah, that's Stu's news. We're super psyched. But let's jump hard segue, take a hard right here. Let's talk about the subject at hand and data and analytics. And Melissa, I'm just going to let you, because you're one of the best ranters I've ever met. You really like to rant about some really legitimate things and some just ridiculous pet peeves that amuse me to a great degree. So I think this is both, right? This is both a pet peeve and a legitimate gripe. But you want to talk a little bit about what your experience has been, with GA4, what GA4 is. Some people may not know the difference between GA4 and Universal Analytics, the predecessor, and Google's really forced everyone over to this new platform. And there's trade-offs with that, right? There's obviously some positives and negatives, but give us your spiel. Like what gets you so fired up about this sucker?
So I'm going to go on record and say that someday, I don't know whether I'm going to be alive or not when this happens, but someday this new analytics system is going to be awesome, because the premises of how it was developed, the backbone of how data is getting collected into this system is great. It's wonderful. And for those who don't know, the major shift between Universal Analytics and this new GA4 analytics is that everything in GA4 is event-based, meaning that every single thing that happens on your website is quote unquote an event, including a session start. Back in Universal, in the olden days, everything was session-based. That is not the case in GA4. And what that means is it gives us analytics people a whole new way of collecting data, and it's much more flexible, and you can do all kinds of cool things theoretically with it. The issue is that the interface is not intuitive. It's really clunky. A lot of things just don't work. And for an average marketer, trying to navigate the system is it's not an easy thing to do. It's not like the old UA where all the reports were kind of labeled like what they were, and you can just poke around in there and boom, hey, you want to know what your session source is? Here's your session source report, and everything was laid out, and you could just click around and dig in and you were done. Like, that is not the case anymore. But I am going on record and I'm going to say one day it's going to be good. The system will be great. It has the potential to be great. It's just not there yet.
So can you give us, our audience, a specific of where something was maybe easy once, how you used to do it, and now what the hoops are you have to jump to try to assemble the same kind of insight?
So if you were to run a basic report in Universal Analytics, and let's just start with like session traffic. So your traffic source report. You could run this report and then you could click on like one single thing you wanted to dig into and it would go down one level. And you could dig a couple levels down in every single report. That's not the case now. You can't do that anymore. It's not really interactive in that way. And when you try and make it work that way, it just doesn't. On the positive side, you can open these reports in what's called an Explorer report, which should have been an amazing function in GA4. That's where us analysts can really dig into those other levels and add new dimensions and just break things down and break things down and break things down, which is what Universal was missing. But you get in there and it's I'm going to say this nicely, it's a mess. It's just a mess. You really need to know what you're doing. And again, just picking a calendar, just choosing dates, like the most functional thing, like the most basic thing you could do. It takes you 10 minutes to choose a date. That's like
I've
the
actually
most
experienced
basic
that
thing
too.
you can't do.
It blows my mind how hard it is to do simple things like change a date range. And I'm having this very similar experience to you, Melissa. I am not a data analyst. I would definitely be more considered your below average marketer. Okay. And so like when I get into Google
Not just in
Analytics,
analytics, to be fair.
just everywhere, right?
Yeah,
But
below
I
average.
am below average American male is probably a better way to describe this. But
Mhm.
I when I get in there, I am trying to find some of the key basic components, especially that used to be there in Google Analytics. And I'm having a really hard time making my time productive. And what I feel like that might do is create a separation between the data analysts and data scientists such as yourself and the average marketers and their ability to use and analyze Google Analytics. So I'm nervous about this.
It's not fun. It's just not
Yeah.
fun. And honestly, I would say this product is still at beta level. Like when it was released, when we were forced to transfer to this system, I'm going to say it was an alpha state. It was not ready. It just wasn't ready. There are too many bugs. There's too many weird things going on. They're constantly making changes, which is great, but it's not a finished product. It's just not.
Yeah, they rushed it, and sometimes Google does delay things, right? But we've not really seen them do this where they sort of shipped a
Yeah.
product that wasn't completed, and it's been out for, I mean, a couple of years now, right? And so
Yeah.
you would have thought they'd made more progress. I would assume they're going to continue. So let's sort of jump out a little bit. We've sort of railed on the product itself. What in your mind, you don't come from the DMO world, right? But you do come from tourism. You've worked in that industry for 20 years. And so you understand the consumer life cycle and how they consume and how they book. And you also understand the challenges that DMOs have by not controlling the transaction. So if you were thrown into a DMO right now, how would you think about trying to create the system to measure what matters to a DMO?
So even though on the DMO site you are not quote unquote transacting, you could still look at it like an e-commerce site. And to be honest, if you were to look at it that way, there are some really great features in the Google Analytics e-commerce section of GA4 that would be super handy. It would take a little bit thinking out of the box in terms of what e-commerce is. But let's say, so you have partners or advertisers or whatever you would like to call your constituents on your DMO, and you always want to be able to show them how much traffic their profile is getting, how many clicks out they've gotten. Probably if you've got phone numbers that are clickable, you want to know how many calls that you've sent over that way. And you could do that within the confines of an e-commerce system. But instead of tracking revenue, so to speak, you can track the impressions, and then you could track the clicks as actual purchases. You could attach a monetary value if you wanted to, or it could just be, I don't know, like a ranking system of sort of like, you know, a scale of 1 to 10 of those types of clicks, depending on where they are on the site. But you'd have a funnel. You'd be able to use the built-in e-commerce reports to show a funnel of impressions to like add to cart to purchase within the system. Again, it takes a little forethought and really planning that out of how you'd want to see it. But it could be a really great function that you could use versus what people probably did back in the Universal times, where you had these events and you had your category, your action, and your label. So your category was probably, you know, accommodations, and your action was click or whatever you wanted to call that action, and the label was whatever that partner name was. Now, if you go within the e-commerce part, you could really you could truly see a funnel for every single partner. You could see that funnel if you really thought about it and planned it out that way.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, right? Because then you could really start to look at each campaign you're running and what impact that's having in a quantifiable way, not just
Yes.
sessions or visits or member clicks, but you could even start to see which members are benefiting from certain campaigns. So if you're running to a certain audience, whether that's higher income or whether that's certain demographics or geography, you can see what impact that's having on the membership. And yeah, that's a really interesting approach. And I've not
Stuart,
thought of that.
I actually have a question for you. Are we not going to kick Melissa off the show for using the word funnel? The double standard here is a little concerning for me.
Well, you know, Melissa will be the first to tell you that travel is not a funnel, it is a cycle. But I think as you articulated that in the episode, there are funnels within that cycle.
Yes.
Is that fair? So
I like it. Okay,
There's
so
definitely
Melissa's
a
on my
funnel
team.
within a session for sure.
that's true.
Absolutely.
A linear behavior that has a finite start and end point, right? But that's part of a cycle and a loyalty loop. And you know, Melissa and I did whole episodes on loyalty loops in our previous podcast. So she is firmly on my side that funnels are overused and wrongly used, and especially when it
couldn't
comes to the
resist.
consumer. I get it. I feel like that's going to become one of those memes in the show, like many others that have already been created. But yeah, I mean, if someone wants to go to the next step, Melissa, like, because I agree. One of the things we do is for like ROI based programs like Google PPC, you know, Google Ads. We run a ROAS based bidding where we sort of do what you're talking about, where we give a quantity to certain actions on the website. So say that's an email sign up, that's a member click, that's a RFP submission, that's a visitor guide, right? Each one of those has a weighted value, and we assign a dollar amount to it, but it's somewhat arbitrary based on their relative value. And then we operate efficiencies and our optimizations based on whatever those goals are, right? And so I think we try to be careful that we don't do that for everything, because depending on where the campaign is in the funnel, right? Again, using that word in terms of top, middle, or bottom of the consideration funnel, piece of this journey, I should say. We're not sort of comparing apples to apples. So we're not saying, for example, if we're running an awareness campaign in display, we're not comparing the ROI in a real way to a pay-per-click campaign that's maybe at the bottom. What about how important is it, do you think, for a DMO to go to the next phase and try to figure out, can they actually measure transactions? Is that a red herring? Because it takes a lot of work. We've done it to a degree. It takes a lot of work. Can we get analytics onto our partner websites to track revenue? Is there value in that? Does it depend on the situation? And how would you approach that?
There's value. I would think that some members may have issues giving you all their data, So that could
Yeah,
be
especially branded hotels, right? You're probably not
sure.
going to get it from branded hotels.
And there's that for sure. But even
Yeah.
independents may be hesitant. I don't know. I would think that each market is maybe a little bit different on how close the DMO is working with the members and that data sharing possibility. But obviously, if you can get down to that level, that gives you an infinite more level of knowledge to be able to optimize everything from brand all the way down so that you can optimize those campaigns if you can get that data and really know what's driving that revenue at the very tail end, for sure.
Yeah. So we're in a very fortunate situation in that we have a very high percentage of independent hotels and we have a very tight relationship with them. And we use a product called flip.to, which I know, Melissa, you're very familiar with, but that allows us to track all the way to conversion for about 80 hotels in our region, which is significant amount. And so what's been interesting is because that's an anomaly and we work with a lot of different partners, some of the partners in the industry that just focus on DMOs haven't really been exposed to that level of data before. And so part of our challenge has been getting them to leverage that data because it's unfamiliar territory, right? A lot of agencies especially are used to optimizing on click-through rates and impressions and maybe referrals to members, but they're not looking at the full value
Don't
of
say
that
Don't say
I
the
almost
word.
said the full funnel.
It's
Damn
okay,
it.
Stuart. Let it happen. Just let it
I'm being
happen.
hoisted by my own petard. I went on record being so anti-funnel, and I find myself using it in like every other episode. But it's the new F word for me. It's like we're gonna have to. But I wonder if that is a reality for other destinations to do what we've done, or can we re-educate the agencies and the providers in the space to think a little differently, think about the website more like an e-commerce platform than just a place to send anonymous users, right?
So I'm going to go back to olden times, back in our former life together, where I often said more traffic does not equal more dollars, right? So for both,
Your favorite phrase was "you can't put traffic in the bank," right?
you
That's
cannot
what you
put
used to say.
traffic in the bank. Is it not true?
I like that.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
Generating more traffic does not necessarily mean generating more money. So to
Mm-hmm.
be able to get that full transactional step-by-step data back, to know that the traffic that you're generating from your DMO all the way down to that independent hotel or whoever it is, that you're sending quality traffic is important to all of you. It's important for your advertising dollars. It's just as important to the member who's paying to be a part of this DMO to know that that traffic is quality and where it's coming from. So if you can tie that all together, it's win-win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit, unless you have any more on the Google side, Adam, because I
Well,
want to start talking about consumer data in a second.
Well,
But
I just
you
want to
want
ask a quick question before we transition, Melissa, and
yeah.
that's, let's just say in theory that there's a below average American male that has some questions, right? Um, we for most marketers, I think the depths of GA4 or other analytics platforms is going to be really difficult for us to educate ourselves into, right? And so the question I have, especially with GA4 and the changes that have been made, where would you point your average marketer to really utilize and the usable portions of GA4 that we should be looking at?
So, oh boy, that is a jolly good question. I would say, yeah, there are the built-in reports that are like your traffic acquisition, and then there are engagement reports where that's where they moved is like your page interaction. So your landing pages, just pages in general, is all under the engagement. And then there's the black hole of the events report. which can have a lot of really great information if you know how to use it. But as you said, for the average marketer, your acquisition reports, your landing page, and your pages and screens is what they call it now because Google. That's where I would go. At least you can see on a general level where your traffic's coming from, how it's converting, again, assuming you've set yourself up well to see that data in the first place. And you could see basic pathing information in there as well.
Great. Great. Thank
It just takes twice as long as it used to on the
Yes.
old Universal Analytics.
Yes.
So I think before we transition to the consumer data side, I think, my advice to DMOs is you need an analytics person in-house. Like, I think it's all fair and well to have agencies that provide analytics, but I think we talked about this on last week's show. Data only gets you so far. We've got to take the data and the insights and turn them into stories to show our value to our community, to our stakeholders. And I think it's hard for you to do that with a third-party resource. So I think if you're a larger DMO and you're well staffed and you have the appetite for that, I think an analytics expert, and it could be a hybrid role of technology and analytics and stuff, but I think that's integral. It's something we haven't had, and it's something we're adding in 2025 because I think it's as great as our agencies are, and we've done some amazing things with data and analytics. There's things that I need to do more with more agility and a little more flexibility that we can't do with an agency. And so I think an in-house expert that can be your advocate, can understand these technologies and really help you leverage them. I think for larger DMOs is an imperative. I think for smaller DMOs, obviously that's more of a challenge to dedicate a resource to analytics. But I still think you should have someone in-house that really understands these tools and how to maximize and leverage them to your benefit and not just rely on someone outside.
Can I speak to that real quick, Stuart?
Yeah.
So I really believe that what you're saying is critical because your data philosophy and hypotheses as an organization should be owned by the organization. And when you allow a third party like an agency to be the decider of your data philosophy and hypotheses, it becomes a subjective thing. And then when another agency comes in and says, let me just do an audit of what your agency is doing, what they're actually doing is just bringing their subjective data philosophy in and convincing you that their data philosophy is more valuable than the other agency's data philosophy. And really the incentives are, let's just make our agency look good. I'm not saying that there's a ton of that it's not disingenuous. In a lot of cases, you're incentivized to do that. But if the organization owns its data philosophy, the agency has to operate within the data philosophy that the organization has. And now you don't have this subjective, what's better, what's worse. The organization has already decided what its objectives and measurements and metrics are going to be. And now you remove the opportunity for that strange subjective interference from a third party.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it should be a core value for your organization, right? Is how do you approach data? What your objectives are, and to your point, the hypotheses. I think that's atypical in the industry right now, is at least my experience. We had this conversation with Zeke Coleman a couple of weeks ago from Tourism Economics, and he talked about this whole concept of the red pill and blue pill. And I think a lot of people have taken that easier path and said, I'd rather not know. Just sort of give me the top line data that makes everything look good and no questions asked, right? And so I think we as an industry, especially following up on last week's conversation with Will Seckham about Doge and how we need to become more efficient, we need to be better storytellers through the data. I think we owe it to ourselves. I mean, data should be at the forefront of everything you decide to do. Like, every decision should be data driven at this point. There's no excuse for not making it data driven. And to your point, if that changes every time you switch agency, which happens a lot in our industry, you're starting from square one every time. So I agree. Whether you have an internal resource that's fully focused on analytics or not, I couldn't agree more that you need to have a core value around what your data approach is.
Well,
And
and if
I'll
it's,
just
oh, go ahead, Melissa.
make
Sorry.
one little side note, and maybe this is just a no-brainer for everybody, but just in case, make sure you are administrators on all of these systems. No agency should be the quote-unquote owner of your Google Analytics or your CRM or your whatever it is. You need to be the administrator on those products so that
Yeah,
those things they don't walk away if you change agencies.
yeah, that, I mean, every account you ever set up you should own, right? And you
Yes.
shouldn't even tie that to an individual within your organization. You should have a generic account that you
Yeah.
use for those
Yeah.
things, because there's inevitably going to be employee turnover. And when that person leaves and you don't know what their password was or have access to this thing anymore, it's just, I mean, can you get it? Sure, but it's a pain in the rear. So don't let your agencies control your destiny. I couldn't agree more. No
And
offense
if
to the
you,
agencies out there,
no, I mean,
right?
look, I own an agency and I'm saying this, but if you believe what the agency tells you to believe, you don't believe anything yourself. And so you have to craft your own beliefs on your own, so that you can defend your position when your stakeholders come calling, because, oh, that's the agency's fault isn't going to work when the stakeholders want to know why you chose that agency if the philosophies don't align.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It was way too much agreement on this. We need to get into some more disagreement. This is Destination Discourse. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about consumer data. And I don't know, Melissa, if you want to sort of probably not talk about your employer's approach to data and consumer data, but maybe let's talk about it in a more generic sense about how should DMOs be thinking about consumer data given all the privacy concerns and given things like, third-party cookies going away eventually, maybe, and
Maybe
um,
Google will change their
maybe
minds again.
and that's such a red herring in my mind, because I mean, third-party cookies already don't work on a lot of platforms anyway, and it's just like we're all sort of waiting on Google to finally give in, but whether they do or not, I don't know, but I think it's a red herring. I think we should be approaching data. Let's just say I have a strong opinion on how we should be approaching data, but I would love to hear your opinion and see if we're still aligned as we were when we worked together, or if we've deviated a little bit.
My opinion is collect as much first-party data as you possibly can. However you can get your hands on it. You just can't rely on, as you said, third-party cookies and, tracking pixels and all these other things that may or may not continue to work. You want to get your hands on as much first-party data that you own as much as possible.
So yeah, I sort of agree. I sort of don't, right? Because I think some of the, if you look at the more stringent rules like GDPR, and you have to be specific about why you're collecting it, what you're collecting, how you're using it. And so I would say, yes, collect as much as you can with a purpose, right? Like, don't just collect
Fair.
data
Yes.
to collect data, collect it for a reason and be articulate in that reason, have clarity in that reason. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you still feel like, at one point you did, do you feel like email communication is still the most valuable form of promotion that's out there? And you certainly thought that for hotels at one point. I don't know if you still do. And you think that's the same for DMOs?
I definitely still think it is for hotels, although I'm seeing a lot of movement with text messaging as well. That's another channel that seems to be working. I can't speak from a DMO perspective. I'd have to dig into other people's brains to let you know about that. But I would suspect that email is still pretty popular and still pretty effective. I could be wrong. You tell
Yeah.
me.
No, I think if it's done right, it's still effective. I just think a lot of DMOs don't do it great, and so I think it's a button people mash, and there's still the spray and pray mentality. And so um
I'm
I
still
think
seeing
when
a lot of that in the travel industry in general. Like it's nearly 2025 and we just need to be better. Just do better. Do better.
yeah, we always joke about how a lot of these like whether it's GDPR or CCPA or any of these regulations, or even back to like CAN spam, these regulations are enacted because of bad actors within the marketing community, right? We do things we shouldn't do. We know we shouldn't do. They're not in our long-term interest, but they're short-term. And we may see a bump in something in the short term, and we chase that at the expense of the long term, and then legislators have to come and prevent us from doing it. So
Yeah.
I think if you were, again, you're not an expert on the DMO, so I'm interested in picking your brain about this. If you were coming into a DMO for the first time and you were charged with developing a data strategy in terms of first party data, creating a customer data platform, let's say, like how would you go about eating that elephant? Obviously, one bite at a time, but what would the first bites look like? Like, where do you think you're intercepting consumers where it's appropriate to collect data, and how would you begin to think about leveraging that data in terms of what would you message and when in the cycle, the circle, the loop of the consumer journey?
Wow, that was such a very large question, Stuart. Thanks for putting that one on me. I would say, so as people are coming into the site, if you can determine, if you have a super smart website and you can determine where they're coming from, I think that's step number one, to see what type of consumer you're getting, like what was the source of that traffic. If they're landing, they're landing on your homepage and this is their first visit to the website, I don't think that's the time to pop up 17 different things to try and collect all their data, because that's just going to chase people away. Wait until they're a little more invested and a little bit more through your site. Maybe it's a couple of pages, maybe it's a timed thing, before you ask them for anything. Just wait until they're engaged a little bit before you chase them off. And then if you can sort of poke and prod them, and maybe it's tools on your website, especially for DMOs, like you have the perfect opportunity to help this consumer along their travel journey by, I hate to use the word survey, but prompting them with questions along their way. When, what are you looking to do? What travel, what season maybe are you looking to travel? And you collect these little data points along the way. It doesn't have to be all at once. It can be, along the way, you collect those points. Hopefully, at some point, they're able to give you a point of contact, an email address, a phone number, or something that you can tie to that person and store that data and start re-engaging them. That's how I would start the process.
Yeah.
Do not scare them off. Don't scare off your consumer.
So you saying that these people have feelings and emotions?
Like, I'm dead inside, you know that, but I think most people have feelings, and travel is supposed to be fun and exciting, and you don't want to be beaten over the head with just stuff you have to do on a website just to do a little bit of investigation and get some information.
Yeah, I love that. I think the travel planning journey there's a lot of friction, right? And it's laborious.
Especially because the majority is going to be on a mobile device.
Yeah.
And that's really,
exactly.
really important to keep in mind, that they're looking at I don't know, phones are kind of big. Let's call it a 4-inch, 5-inch screen. You don't want to be so invasive that they just have to keep clicking buttons and closing windows to just get some basic information from your website.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should have a goal that the planning isn't the most sucky part of travel, right? Maybe we can inject more fun into the travel planning process and learn a little bit about them along the way. Yeah, we're trying to do a lot of that. It's tough, right? It's a lot of work, and a lot of resources have to go into that. But I definitely agree with the philosophy for sure. Adam, I've been hogging all the questions, man. Do you have any questions for this analytics guru, this data nerd that we have?
I've got a couple of questions, and it's funny. I would love to disagree with you, Melissa, but you just know way more than me about this stuff than I do. So this is definitely a learning session for me, as opposed to kind of our normal discourse function. But so we're actually in the process right now of rebuilding our own website as an organization. And I have a hypothesis, and I actually want to run it by you and see what you think. But most agency websites, when people arrive on that, and by the way, this will be relevant to the DMO. So I want to be very clear that this isn't so self-indulgent that everybody else should just check out. But what we're trying to do is, instead of having all these different pages, some is our work where people can go see what we do, and or some of our past work, and there's all these different pages, and then people have to navigate that on their own. What we're actually thinking about doing is, instead of this big hero image when they get there, we're saying, why are you here? And we have a multiple choice question.
Yes. Yes.
And we're asking them to click on one of those three answers to the question, and then we'll serve them the content that's most relevant to the reason they're there.
Imagine that.
Should DMOs also be doing something like that?
Yes. We're
Hey, if you
supposed
go to the top
disagree
of
here,
Visit
but
Myrtle
I
Beach,
can't.
we already do that at Visit Myrtle Beach. I think we don't do it as well as we could. I think we could do it better, but I do think if we start approaching the relationship as a conversation instead of a transaction, then we would treat people more like humans. In that's what hospitality is about, right? I think we ask individual questions, learn a little bit more, provide more relevant context to what we're providing, and then ask more questions, and then we get to know each other. We're dating them, right? We should
Well,
we
go
should
ahead.
always date people before we ask them to sleep with us, right? Whether that's in reality or as a destination. If we're asking someone to come sleep in our hotel rooms, we should date them for a little bit before we ask them.
A new segment of the show called Dating Advice with Stuart Butler. I love it. Uh, Stuart, I think you're right, because the thing that I think is happening is we're in the shift right now in the website experience from these text heavy, long form copy on every individual page. Nobody is reading that freaking copy. I can't say it enough. Nobody's reading it. And so, instead of thinking about it as a copy centric website, I think what we have to do is get people to the site and have them self-identify as quickly as possible, and then serve them content that they want to consume, not content they're forced to consume by long form copy. And right now, video is kind of the most desirable type of content people want right now. So do we actually have it set on our site where, when people identify who they are, we're giving them the videos they want to see? And I think that's very, very limited right now in the destination marketing industry.
So I will give you a real life example of a destination that I went to and things that I started researching that I never thought I would. So I went to Cabo San Lucas a couple months ago. I've never been there. It's my first time out of the country, unless you count Canada, which you really can't. I've never been out of the country. I've certainly never been to Cabo. And I had no idea. I was asked to go on this trip. I was invited. I was like, okay, what now? Like, I had to figure out where we were staying, what there was to do. I had to go check out restaurants. I had to check out transportation. I do all these things. And do you know that I hate to say it, I went to 0 websites. I went to YouTube
Mm-hmm.
and I watched, I can't even tell you how many videos. And I went to Google Maps to find out where everything was in relation to each other. But I never went to a single website aside from like a restaurant website to look at menus.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're not Gen Z or a millennial, right?
I'm
You're a
not.
little north of that, right? So
Yeah, a little bit.
it's a misnomer that the short form video and video in general is just for the younger generation. I think more and more people are consuming video all the time. I agree. And I think the other thing we got to consider is how our interaction with our devices is going to change, especially with iPhone 16, iOS 18, and how ChatGPT has now got the conversational piece in it with your words, and that's going to roll out to everyone. We're going towards more of a conversational relationship with technology. And so if we want to be relevant, we still got to have all the information that we have on our website, but we've got to be able to provide it in a more conversational and personalized way. Personalization is an overused buzzword, probably overused as much, if not more, than authenticity in our industry. But we're not talking about like the kitschy form of personalization that has been bandied around for the last 5-10 years. We're talking about real conversation with a real person and what actually matters to them. And I think any DMO that doesn't do that, their website in their organization may be obsolete in the next 5 years if they don't jump on that very quickly. That's a scary thought. So we've meandered a little bit today. Go ahead, Adam. Finish the thought.
Oh, I was going to say that's a lot of sunk cost to have it slip into oblivion. I think I would much rather see people pivot and evolve than suddenly find themselves in a terrible spot like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's something you can start today. You can start by just putting contextual short form video on relevant pages within your website. You probably got some of them on social, you know. Go grab them. Go grab, even if it's not your video, go grab other people's video on social and embed it in relevant places on your website. If you write a blog, hey, here are the top 10 places to eat tacos in your destination, do a little video montage with it. And I think people are going to respond to that. And give people choice. I think that's always been good advice, regardless of what you're doing. Give people choice. Well, Melissa, we're running out of time. We meandered.
That was quick.
We covered a lot. I know we talked about GA4. We talked about consumer data. We railed on the website. So we did a lot. But I don't know. Are there any final thoughts for you that you want to leave our listener singular with before we pop off?
Always be testing. I don't know.
Oh, immense. That is the greatest advice anyone has ever given, I think. Always be testing.
Don't curse too much at your computer if you work in an office when you're, working with GA4. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
I don't know. Sometimes cursing makes you feel a bit better. I don't know. Especially if you're working on your own and no one can hear you,
Then
you're in an office and no one can hear you scream, that kind of thing. Adam, final thoughts.
I just appreciate the conversation, Melissa. I've learned a lot today, and I don't know. I think there's a lot for me to think about, especially as it pertains to the website we're in the process of building for our organization and how we support destinations as they're building their own. So, yeah, really appreciate the conversation, Melissa.
So happy to have been here. I want to come back.
You're welcome back. Yeah, welcome back anytime. We'll tackle. We need to talk about data and performance more in this industry. I think we've had a couple of episodes so far. Like I said, we had Zeke Coleman. If you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to the Zeke episode. It was really insightful for me, for sure, talking about I guess some of the things this industry is doing and is aware we're doing, but probably isn't in our best long-term interest. And so I mean, it's a conversation we're going to continue. Melissa, if people want to get hold of you, want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
I am on LinkedIn at my name, Melissa Kavanagh. That's with a
Without
K
a U.
U.
Yeah. And Adam, if they want to reach out to you.
LinkedIn, Adam Stoker, and you can find me on Tourism IQ.
Great. And you can find me, stuart.butler@visitmodelbeach.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, somewhere lurking around, making fun of Adam's posts and his lack of likes for requests of jingles and such. But please subscribe wherever you're listening to this. Do us a favor too. If you've enjoyed this, we're like 11 or 12 episodes in now. If you've enjoyed anything from this, please share it. Go on your social media, just share something you've learned or something you've liked, or just tell a colleague, tell someone, hey, have you checked out this show? We'd love to grow the audience and continue to give value. This is a love letter to the industry. We just want everyone to be a little bit better tomorrow than they were today. And so we appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.